We had to increase the number of beds that we have sa PGH ulit. We're really concerned na sana po wag naman umapaw ulit yung mga healthcare facilities.
We cannot just be complacent about the numbers now because the ICU beds are slowly being filled up and it's always a percentage of the number of cases.
You heard the health experts, frontliners warning about the rising hospital utilization rates for COVID-19 admissions. Occupancy rate in NCR ICU beds is already at 65%.
As more cases of the COVID-19 variants are detected, the UP Octa research team forecasts that COVID-19 infections might reach 18,000 daily by mid-April. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Let's start with several hospitals nearing critical levels in occupancy due to the surge of COVID-19 cases in Metro Manila.
But the palace says placing the country under MECQ is not yet an option. Marian Enriquez has the big story.
Hospitals see new surge in admissions with the fast rising COVID cases in Metro Manila. Occupancy at the Philippine General Hospital nears critical level at 75%. From 60 daily admissions in February, it now has 140 patients a day this March. More than 2 dozens are still waiting admission.
We had to increase the number of beds that we have sa PGH ulit. We have to get it back.
PGH spokesman Jonas Del Rosario says it's not easy to add more wards. Some staff have already been assigned to non-COVID operations, while others are under isolation.
Para ngayon naman po masanda kami dun sa gera. Pero kung wala ka ng kwartong ibibigay, wala ka ng ibibigay na rooms for them or wards para mabigyan ng problema din.
A lot of private hospitals also see a shortage in nurses.
Mga nurses po namin hindi naman dumadami, kumukonti pa. So kahit gusto naming mag-open, let's say, ng mga 20 beds, kung ang aming mga staff nurses ay pwede lang sa 10 beds, ay hanggang doon lang po talaga kami.
The Health Department reports an increased occupancy rate of ICU beds in several regions, with NCR at 65% and Cordillera at 71%. But nationwide, utilization rate is still under low risk at 35%.
We cannot just be complacent about the numbers now because the ICU beds are slowly being filled up and it's always a percentage of the number of cases.
Despite the surge, the palace says a return to MECQ will not happen this month.
Kasi kung hindi po natin mapapababa yung R0, we do not know what will happen in April.
As cases continue to surge and as vaccine rollout is still underway, medical frontliners remind the public to observe minimum health protocols. The DOH is even pushing once again for the wearing of face masks inside homes. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Our health facilities braced and equipped for this wave of infections. To get these insights, we have Dr. Ron Jean Solante, Head of San Lazaro Hospital's Adult Infectious Disease Department. Dr. Solante, kamusta po dyan sa San Lazaro?
Hi, good evening. So far, medyo kaya pa naman, no? Our bed capacity allotted for COVID is almost 60% full. And our intensive care unit is already full since last week. So we're just juggling our patients. Pag hindi na masyadong critical, inaalis na namin sa ICU and we put all the new criticals admitted into the ICU. And at the same time, we are also making some arrangement among the ward cases that some of these rooms will also be converted into like a mini ICU setup.
But Doctor, you heard from PGH kanina rin, sinabi nila they can probably try to find a way to manage new rooms, but they're saying even the personnel, wala rin daw mga nurses. Are you seeing the same problems when it comes to human resource?
As of this moment, hindi pa namin naramdaman ngayon ang lack or kumonte ang healthcare workers namin in terms of those who are absent or those who are infected, no? But that's part of our plan. That if that eventuality will come, then we'll really have to adjust and we'll be doing cohorting. No? In one room, there will be 2 or 3 patients that are positive, so that less of the care and support will be focused on a single COVID patients.
But Dr. Salate, do you share the alarm and sense of urgency now being aired by public health experts, both in the private and public sectors, and basically the question of, is it time for another timeout?
Yeah, so I was with the Philippine College of Physicians as treasurer, and we already made our statement, and hopefully we can release it tomorrow. So the priority here is not really the lockdown or the MECQ. It's more of encouraging the government to really strictly implement the stricter implementation of the health protocols. And we specify some of the areas where there is a high risk of transmission. Like, for example, we would like to recognize the importance of probably closing some of the centers that or establishment that we might see that might not be necessary, especially at this point in time.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Solante. Dr. Rontjean Solante, Head of San Lazaro Hospital's Adult Infectious Disease Department. New COVID-19 infections posted today marked another record high for the year, 5,404. Octa Research sees the uptrend continuing. The big number tonight, 18,000. This could be the number of new cases recorded per day, according to Octa Research. If the country fails to keep transmissions at bay, the group sees new cases jumping to as much as 8,000 daily by the end of the month. Octa places the current virus reproduction number at 1.9, way beyond the ideal threshold. Inoculations remain slow at 193,000 doses so far as government awaits pending vaccine supply.
These are the other big stories tonight. In just a few hours, a uniform curfew will be implemented across the National Capital Region starting tonight. Metro Manila residents return to buying goods in bulk to stock up on supplies. With cases of the P1 and P3 variants being detected in the Philippines, health experts are pointing to a faulty quarantine system for the spread of COVID-19 variants in the country. And pop superstars Beyonce and Taylor Swift set new Grammy records. But the BTS army is less than thrilled after the K-pop sensation failed to clinch an award. These big stories right after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Health experts believe the presence of new and more transmissible COVID-19 virus in the Philippines can be blamed on the country's leaky quarantine system. One News Chief Correspondent Ed Lingao brings us the details.
One of the disappointing things is that the quarantine has been leaky.
In One News's COVID town hall meeting Sunday night, medical experts said the country's faulty quarantine system allowed several COVID variants to get through our borders. According to microbiologist Father Nick Ostriaco, other ASEAN countries have been able to control their borders.
There have been countries in Southeast Asia that have been able to keep the variants out.
Unfortunately, as Father Nick had said, we had some leaky borders and some problems because we really will not be coming down with these variants if we had addressed them from the very beginning.
Part of the problem is the volume of returning overseas workers that had to be processed in quarantine sites. Returning Filipinos are normally tested for the virus at their country of origin. and then tested again at a quarantine facility when they arrive in the Philippines. If they turn out negative for the virus, they are allowed to go home on condition that they observe themselves for the next 2 weeks. Still, the virus and its variants have gotten through the screening. From January 3 to 21 this year, 13 of the 18 new cases of the UK variant involved returning overseas workers. Then, 2 of the 6 people tested positive for the South African variant last March 2 were also overseas workers. And now we have at least 1 case of the dreaded P1, or the Brazil variant, brought in by an overseas worker from Brazil. Austriaco says the volume of returning overseas workers may have overwhelmed the screening system.
I know we have particular challenges, especially because of the large numbers of OFWs who have to return home. Now we have the P1 Brazilian variant, which from a molecular biologist perspective is really one of the largest challenges we will have facing the future.
As of end January, at least 420,000 overseas workers had come home because of the COVID pandemic. Another 60,000 more overseas workers are expected to return home this year.
The question here now is, we have 1 P1. Are we going to do something to prevent more P1s from entering? Because the P1 of all, it combines the worst of the other 2.
Ed Lingao, We Are One News.
Today marks the first year since a lockdown was implemented to stem the COVID-19 spread. Let's take a look back on the year that was. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez gives you a front seat to the story.
The code alert system of COVID-19 public health event is hereby raised to code red sub-level 2. Community quarantine is hereby imposed in the entire of Metro Manila.
At midnight of March 15 last year, Metro Manila began what could be the longest health lockdown in the world. It took a while for the implications to sink in, but by the next morning, Metro Manilans realized that the National Capital Region would close its borders for an entire month. Checkpoints were thrown up in major arteries in and out of the NCR. 12 million people were locked in the Capital Region, essentially locked in their own homes. All work and classes were suspended. The National Capital Region, the engine of the country's economy, had come to an abrupt stop. With public transport also suspended, thousands of migrant workers were also left stranded in Metro Manila. Thousands began a long, hard exodus back to their home provinces, walking for days, even weeks. For a time, government was even hesitant to call it a lockdown because of the negative connotations.
Ayaw namin gamitin yan, pero kasi takot kasi with lockdown. But it's a lockdown.
It started with one region, until it was the whole country that was placed under what seems to be the world's longest lockdown. March 16, government leveled up the quarantine. The president placed the entire of Luzon under a lockdown for 6 months. Other provinces soon followed. Iloilo on March 21, Antique March 22, Cebu and Negros Occidental on March 30. By the first part of April, the whole country was already under one form of quarantine. When we first went under lockdown a year ago, we were alarmed because the country had 52 COVID-19 cases. A year later, some 620,000 Filipinos had already been infected, with 50,000 active cases. 3 new variants of concern have entered the country, and the numbers have begun to spike again. And exactly 1 year later, the checkpoints are back in force. Today marks 1 year since we were under the strictest lockdown, but this is not an anniversary that calls for a celebration. As we wait for more vaccines to arrive and for the next inoculations to begin, COVID-19 cases continue to soar. Some of us might feel as if nothing has changed, while others prepare for the worst. Whether or not this is going to be another difficult year, we can ask ourselves, what did we learn from the pandemic, and how is the government handling the crisis? I'm Pamela Vasquez, and we are One News.
Meanwhile, the PNP stands by its chief, Debold Sinas, who recently tested positive for COVID-19. The PNP said Sinas did not violate health protocols when he went to Oriental Mindoro. Officer in charge Guillermo Elizar says Sinas' March 9 swab test results covered his March 11 visit to the province. Elizar says Sinas doesn't have to be screened at the Calapan Pier since he's riding a PNP chopper. Palace spokesman Harry Roque, meanwhile, also has tested positive for COVID-19. Roque's last public event was in Lawag City, Ilocos Norte on March 12. Pasig Mayor Vico Soto is now also under isolation after his driver succumbed to COVID-19. Soto says he's not experiencing any symptoms so far.
Kasalukuyan, ako po ay naka-quarantine. Nag-COVID-19 test na rin po ako, nag-PCR test po ako kahapon. Kikiramay po tayo sa pamilya ni Kuya Vener at sa kanyang mga kaibigan.
Time for an express look at some of the day's big stories. 5 respondents in the Christine Dacera case eye to file counter charges against the flight attendant's family, including Dacera's mom. They're seeking to file charges for perjury, libel, cybercrime, and malicious persecution. Despite facing charges, the respondents said they feel vindicated as the NBI has yet to show proof that Dacera was raped. The Justice Department's task force on extrajudicial killings is set to formally launch a probe into the Calabarzon police raids that claimed the lives of 9 activists. The agency confirmed that the case falls within the task force's jurisdiction. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara assures the public that investigations will be fair and balanced. Palawan Governor Jose Alvarez is conceding defeat over the plebiscite seeking to divide Palawan into 3 provinces. In the partial official count, those who want to stick to the status quo still lead with 75,000 votes versus 68,000. Alvarez admits feeling disappointed but said it's a loss for the people of Palawan. Time for another quick break. When we return, let's take a look at how LGUs are preparing for the implementation of a uniform lockdown starting tonight. And what turned the Grammys into scammies? The K-pop icons may have failed to bag a Grammy, but they still put on an explosive end to the awards show.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Unified curfew hours beginning tonight in NCR, adding another layer of restriction to Metro Manila cities that have since imposed granular lockdowns in their localities. Let's get the latest from Lynn Olavario reporting live from Mandaluyong. Lynn, how are preparations for the curfew policy going so far in the metro?
Robbie, Metro Manila residents brace themselves for the unified curfew hours taking effect tonight until the end of the month. Several LG officials, including here in Barangay Addition Hills in Mandaluyong City, have started increasing their manpower to implement restrictions and aid in information dissemination about the curfew. Here in Mandaluyong City's most populated barangay, Addition Hills cluster commanders and other officials have been briefed on how to implement the unified curfew. The National Capital Region will uniformly impose curfew hours beginning 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Barangay Addition Hills has 41 active cases, the third highest in Mandaluyong. Zones 4, 5, and 9 at Block 41 are under granular lockdown.
Andi dito talaga yung mga makukulit. Pero sabi ko nga, pagtutulong-tulungan namin to.
Barangay officials also blame minors for this spike. They're now considering a resolution restricting internet shop operations to prevent gatherings.
Ang hilig mag-ML So ilan sa mga natin yan, ilan sa mga pagbabawal natin. Isa sa mga cause ng gathering siya.
Additional volunteers will be deployed in main roads to impose the curfew. The residents we spoke to have no complaints about the curfew order.
Mas maganda po. Okay po yun dahil simple tayo. Hindi, adjust na lang po namin ma'am yung oras ma'am. Kailangan din mag-overtime.
Medical frontliners, BPO workers, law enforcement officials, and fast food chain employees are among those exempted from the curfew. Other NCR cities put more areas under granular lockdown. At least 6 barangays in Manila will be closed down for disinfection, contact tracing, and testing efforts. In Makati City, Mayor Abby Binay declared Zones 1 and 2 in Barangay Pio del Pilar under critical zones, placing them on localized lockdown until March 16. Quezon City, on the other hand, has suspended the operations of gyms, internet cafes, and spas starting today. Some residents, meanwhile, started stocking up on alcohol in anticipation of the liquor ban in the area. Robbie, Barangay Addition Hills Chairman Carlitos Hernan says first-time violators will be issued warnings tonight. But the next time they violate the curfew policy, penalties ranging from 500 pesos to 3,000 pesos or up to 1 month imprisonment could await them. Robbie.
Maraming salamat, Lynn Olivario, reporting live from Mandaluyong.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Philippine Star, Justice Secretary Bernardo Guevara claims President Rodrigo Duterte has nothing to do with the high number of lawyers killed so far during his term. Guevara said Duterte is a lawyer himself and wouldn't have a policy that imperils his colleagues. Independent tallies show a huge difference in killings that occurred since 2016 and under previous administrations. Trade Undersecretary Ireneo Vismonte tells Business World Live only 4% of micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, remain closed because of the pandemic. More than half are partially operational, while the rest are already fully operational. And this from News 5, the Transportation Department clarifies that the staff seen on a viral MRT disinfection video was under a contracted maintenance provider, Sumitomo Mikespi. The said employee has been suspended and is undergoing retraining, according to transportation officials.
Pope Francis held a Mass at the Vatican St. Peter's Basilica on Sunday to mark the 500th anniversary of Christianity in the Philippines. Celebrations started with a traditional Filipino procession. Representatives of the Filipino Church were in attendance, including Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. In his homily, the Pope said the joy of the gospel, which the Philippines received half a millennia ago, is evident in the Filipino people.
E qui a Roma le donne filippine sono contrabbandiere di fede, perché dove vanno a lavorare, lavorano ma seminano la fede. Questa è, permettetemi la parola, una malattia generazionale, ma beata malattia, conservatela.
And to commemorate the event, the Cebu-Cordova Link Expressway Corporation is building 8 40-meter-high crosses along the expressway inspired by the cross planted by Magellan 500 years ago. The structures will tower over the Mactan Channel and most of Cebu City by April this year. 800 Filipinos were baptized in 1521 on the island of Cebu.
Now for the big story in sports, new blood now enters the PBA after this year's rookie draft.
I'm just super honored, super excited to be in this position, and I'm ready to come in and get to work.
That was Cal State Los Angeles star Joshua Monzon, who emerged as the top overall draft pick as expected. Monzon comes as a much-needed reinforcement for Terra Firma after trading CJ Perez to the Beermen. Meanwhile, Northport secured 6'6" swingman Jamie Malonzo from La Salle and Portland University. 2019 NCAA MVP Calvin Oftana is the third overall pick as he heads to NLEX. 65 out of a record 86 aspirants have made new homes in the league. PBA Chairman Ricky Vargas assures the young guns that they will work on the current issues hounding the league.
To our incoming rookies, welcome to the family. You enter the league at an historic time. You are the future stars of our league. The PBA is your platform to show and develop your skills. This is your home.
The PBA is looking to kickstart season 46 on April 11 through a semi-bubble setup in a venue or two in Metro Manila.
Beyonce was right. Girls run the world indeed.
Oh, okay, wait a minute. History has just been made.
Of her 9 Grammy nods, the most this year, she won 4, including Best R&B Song for Black Parade and Music Video for Brown Skin Girl. Infuriated armies made scammies trend on Twitter, with at least 250,000 tweets from the Philippines alone. BTS closed the show with a performance of Dynamite. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Curfew is starting today. Do you think we'll really reach 18,000 in April?
Well, let's clarify that 18,000, it is a shocking number, and I think we all have to take note of it, but this is the projection of Okta Research. So that assumes that nothing changes. Nothing changes in our behaviors, nothing changes in the restriction policies, and that's their projection for the middle of April. In the meantime, they've also up their projection for the end of the month. Dati, di ba, pinoproject nila 6,000, 6,500 by the end of March. Now they're saying it could reach 8,000 by the end of March.
Kailangan na rin pala mag-mask sa loob ng bahay, ano?
Yan isang pinag-aaralan. Anyway, pag-uusapan natin lahat yan. It will continue on the Chiefs immediately after the big story.
But for now, it's curfew time, no dinners outside.
No, you can be the curfew.
That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
At ako naman si Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.